Yeah, I think we're live. We're live. Hello. All right. So I am excited to do office hours today, despite the fact that I got my second dose of the vaccine, Moderna. Moderna. I feel like it's murdering me, but still worth it. So anyway, I am feeling achy and not super great, but I decided I just wanted to do this today anyway. So yeah, the way this works, if you've never been part of office hours before, is I people ask me questions all the time, and it is fun, but it's also very disruptive to my flow of whenever it is that they happen to ask me. And so I refer people to my office hours so that I can kind of put all the questions all in one place. And then we also have this streamed and recorded on YouTube forever. So if people can't make it or whatever, then they can at least see the recording. And other people can see it too, which is nice. So the way that this works is I give priority to people who are actually in the Zoom meeting because they took the time to be here. And then I open it up to people who ask in the Discord. So if you are not a member of the Discord yet, this is a great place for more than just office hours. And you can go to kcd.im/discord, and that will give you an invite, and you'll go through the onboarding stuff, and then you'll get access to the Discord, and you can come to the KCD Office Hours channel and ask your questions here, and I will do my best to answer them. And that, and all the links that I share and stuff will be shared in this channel here. So it's kind of useful. And that's it. So anybody in the Discord or in the Zoom meeting have a question to kick us off?
Uh, Hey,
Hi.
can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, I'm having doubt, but it's not in yet. It is in like Express and ES build. So it is okay to I can share it in Discord.
Yeah, sure. And if you'd like, you can also share your screen too. Yeah, whatever is easiest for you.
Okay, yeah. I will share my screen.
Cool.
Yeah.
Are you having trouble sharing the screen?
Yes, I'm just checking out settings.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
While you're figuring that out, does anybody else in the Zoom have a question that I can answer? Okay, cool. Then we'll just wait. Actually, while you're doing that, I'll answer a question or two from the Discord. So this individual has been working on a open source version of Remix that they're calling Premix. It's not exactly the same. They're making different trade-offs and stuff, and also like it's open source. I don't think they're actually using it. It's mostly for experimenting and playing around with stuff. That's all to say that personally, I wouldn't be using this in production right now, but it is really cool that they're working on this and using it to learn. And they just had a question about, yeah, that wasn't a question, more of a just FYI. Having some issues with the server endpoint. The href is the path name client is on. Block React router from routing, fetching the data, unblock the routing and set the data to the context. The issue is sometimes the context state updates before or after the router is finished routing. And because of that, the currently rendered components throw an error. Yeah, so you definitely, I understand why it would throw an error. It's unclear to me why sometimes the context state updates before React router has finished routing, because you said that you block React router here, you fetch the data. So yeah, I think what you need to do is make sure that you don't unblock routing until after you set the data to the context state. Because from what it looks like, they were unblocking the routing and then setting the data. I think they need to just do that in the reverse. I'm pretty sure that's all that is. Okay, are you ready to share your screen?
No, I think I have some issue with my computer or something like that.
Mm.
I have shared a link to Discord question.
Yeah, that sounds fine. Okay, cool. So while you're doing that, oh, and they appear to be watching, or they noticed that. Oh no, you did share it already. Okay, cool. For some reason it didn't take me to, there it is. Okay, exploring React SSR and ES build. Here's your code, here's your config. To be clear, I've actually never configured ES build. Well, okay, that's false. MDX bundler configures ES build, but I've not done a whole lot with it. So I may not be very helpful, but we will see. We've got a plugin, something, start and end callbacks. Okay. If you were to run this application, it would work initially, but when you change the code, server won't get updated. Okay, yeah. So in general, yeah, having a server that's like running, and what your goal is you want it to start the server running, and then if I make a change, the server doesn't have to restart. You just update the files that the server's using. Is that what you're trying to do?
I don't know. What I'm trying to do is when the file changed, I will stop the server, then I will start the server again.
I see. Yeah. So as far as I know, I might be wrong. I very well could be wrong, but I don't think that that ES build has a watch mode. So you kind of had to do that yourself. Is that correct? You probably know more about this than I do. I'm not sure how much help I'll be.
No, actually, ES build has a watch mode.
Oh yeah.
But I don't think watch in on rebuild. But I don't think it's working on once it finished rebuilding. It's like in once rebuild starts, the function will execute.
I see. So what you're trying to do is you say, hey, when let's see.
I'm trying to do
when the build is
plugin.
finished. Sorry.
Yes. So in a plugin SMS, there will be a setup build. So I will use a build on end to create that stop and create server function.
Right. What my guess is right here, you're getting the cached version of this module.
Kent, would you mind sharing your screen?
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Yes. Sorry about that. Thanks, Peter. So my guess is that here's your restart plugin, and you specify that as ES build or as part of your ES build config. And this takes a setup, which has a build that has some utilities and stuff. Some for events, you have this on end, and right here, you're using native ESM, or I suppose because you're importing this. Yeah, which is cool. And what's happening is the initial time that you build, or the initial time that you run, this import is going to say, oh, okay, let me go get the server code, and we'll call the stop, and then we'll call create server, which presumably starts it. And so then you make a change, and so then build ends again. And so then we come down to this code. Well, the way that Node works, it's always worked this way, is when it sees an import, or before imports it was a require, when it sees a require for a module that's already run, it does not run that module again, and instead it keeps a cache of all of the modules that you've already required or imported in the past, and it will return to you the cached value. And so here you're going to stop and create the server for the previous module that you already had, which is why you're seeing the result that you are. So there's a bit of a problem here, and like the solution to this, actually Remix does this. Let me think. I don't know how happy they would be for me to show you their source code, but They're probably fine if I show you the built code because I think it's instructive. So I'm just going to open up my website and show you in node modules. Huh, that's odd. Let's try this again. This happens sometimes where code like doesn't actually open properly. There we go. Okay, yeah. So if we go to here, node modules, remix, run, and it's the serve package. They got this idea from one of the members of the community, or maybe they had the same idea. I don't know, but it's a good idea. And what they do, oh no, it's in the dev thing here. I think it's in, I think it might be in CLI actually. Yeah, here we go. So they have this function as part of the watch script. So before they go and require any new files or require the files again, they have this purge app require cache, which is pretty simple. It just goes through everything that's in the require.cache. And that is like here, let's do require chalk. Okay, so now if I say require.cache, I'm going to have an array of all of the modules that have been required. So here's chalk, and chalk depends on other modules. And so here's some dependencies of chalk and so on and so forth. That's a little small maybe. And so, yeah, when you require a file, it gets added to this require cache object or array. And so what they're doing, or I guess, no, it is an object where the key is the full path to the module, and then the value is a module object. Okay, so they're iterating through the require cache, and for any item in the require cache that has a path that starts with the build path, so like where you end up building these files to. So in your case, that's going to be the dist directory. So for any of those, we're going to delete that entry in the require cache, so that next time somebody tries to require it, Node is going to look up in the cache and say, oh, that's not there. So let me run that file and get that value so I can cache it. So this is how Remix avoids this problem. And you can do the same thing in regular like Express apps and stuff. But you've got a bit of a problem because you're using native ESM. And I don't know very much about this, but I do know that the require cache behaves differently with imports. And I think that this is actually causing some issues for Jest. I believe that they have like a path forward. There may be an experimental flag or something like that. But yeah, this is potentially a problem for you. I just noticed that you're setting your format for your compiled code to CJS. So you might actually be okay because yeah, but you end up doing a dynamic import and then you've got requires here. So I made an assumption here, but I'm thinking that you'd probably be better off to just do a require right here if you're not doing native ESM. And then right before you do this require, you would have a line that says, go through all the require cache and just destroy or delete everything that starts with the full path. You need the full path to that dist directory. And I think that would solve your problem.
Okay, I'll check it. Thanks.
Yeah, good luck. And I doubt that Ryan would get super mad at me. This is recorded, so he'll be able to see this. Nobody tell him. I'm sure he'll be fine. But I'll just share that that function. It's a pretty basic thing. So, and in fact, yeah, I'm pretty sure they got this from a member of their community anyway. Okay, not that they didn't know that that's something you could do already, but all right, sweet. Anybody else in the Zoom call have a question before I move on to? Yeah, hi.
Hi. Yeah. So
Sorry, how do you pronounce your name? I haven't ever actually said your name.
Yeah. It's pronounced as Mokshit.
Mokshit. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've commented in the Discord channel. About setting the route data.
Okay, so oh, I see. So you've got a problem where yeah, this is an interesting problem. So
Yeah.
let me see if I can describe it properly. You block the routing, you go get the data, you update the data in context, and because you haven't routed to the new components yet, that update of data into context gets propagated or re-renders all the consuming components, which now are accessing properties on objects that aren't in that context value anymore. And so if you route or change the route first to get all those components off, before you update context, then you end up in a situation where the new components don't have the data that they need yet. So you're kind of in a like, well, which do I do? They both don't work. Yeah. So there are I think the ultimate solution would be to combine this into a single state update so that you could, and I don't know if this is possible, but if there was some way for you to say, hey, I'm updating the route and the state at exactly the same time, so there's only one re-render, then that would be the solution. I'm not sure exactly how Remix does this, but I believe that they store state not in context, but in history state. And this is one area that I don't know a whole lot about. But if you look at the history,
Yeah.
oh, have you pursued this already?
Yeah.
Does this not work?
I'll try it
Or
again. Yeah, I'll try it again. I'll try this again.
no, sorry, I
So
didn't
basically, they store it on the state property in the history, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And this has the benefit of being able to navigate back and still have access to that state.
Yeah, and not prefetching it.
Yeah. So that's what I would pursue first.
Yeah. Also added some new features to this project. I added file-based routing and image optimization. And yeah, that style sheet injection that I was talking about in the Discord.
Yeah, cool.
I've added all of it.
Yeah, I think it's awesome that you're working on this. It's kind of a fun project. I'm sure you're learning a ton.
Yeah, I'm doing a lot.
Cool.
Thanks.
Yeah. All right. Anybody else in the Discord think of it, or in the Zoom have a question before I move to these others in the Discord?
I did have one, but it's not really code related.
That's all right.
So where I just started implementing sort of a lighthouse performance budget at my job. And the problem is we have a lot of third-party tools that like inject JavaScript and styles and stuff as well. So the problem we run into is that our numbers like dynamically change even throughout the course of a day.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So the idea was to sort of like block that stuff in Lighthouse to where we're just running the performance budgets towards our own code that we maintain. But that also has the drawback of not really giving us a realistic number of when we go to prod. So I was just wondering if you had any suggestions around that.
Yeah, well, this suggestion probably won't fly, but get rid of those third-party scripts. That's probably the best thing that you can do, both for the problem that you're facing and for your users, frankly. This is like a eliminate the problem rather than solve the problem sort of thing. But I mean, and if that's potentially an option, then you could bring this to your boss or the people who make the decisions and say, hey, look, we have no control over the performance of our application because we're including all these third-party vendor scripts. Lots of those are like analytics and tracking and stuff like that. And yeah, so maybe you could get rid of some of those. Certainly the tracking ones. But yeah, I think barring that, you've correctly identified the trade-offs of like, if we measure without the scripts, then at least we're measuring what we can control, but we're not getting a clear picture of what the users are actually experiencing. And personally, I take that trade-off because if you don't go with that, then the measurement that you're making is basically useless. You can't track progress. You can't you can't identify when you've made an enormous regression in your own code. like when you see the spike, most people will just write that off as, oh, a third-party script did a weird thing again. So I would personally go with the option of blocking the third-party scripts during the Lighthouse testing. And then maybe you could have another Lighthouse test that runs occasionally to double check that actual production with all those third-party scripts isn't like outrageously bad. And you don't really use that to track progress, just to make sure you don't pass a certain threshold of what's acceptable. That's probably the approach that I would take if I couldn't convince them to eliminate the problem altogether by dropping these third-party scripts.
Sure, and that's sort of what we're doing now anyway, because we have, I guess, another team that handles like running page speed insights every hour and sort of averaging that in production. And then we just added the same sort of check to our GitLab CI pipelines. So that'll probably be the one in our pipelines where we're just testing our code purely.
Yeah. I think that's an acceptable trade-off. Yeah, totally. Cool. Good question and good luck. That's great. All right. Other questions in Zoom?
I do have another question.
Yes.
So when you're testing the custom hooks, if you have to test two different custom hooks with a single wrapper component, I can't do that. In a testing library, React hooks. React testing library has a React hooks library, right?
Yeah. So you have two hooks and you want to test them both at the same time in the same like render hook call?
No, like I have two different hooks. It should be in two different components, but a single wrapper, single context component.
Okay.
Yeah. Which is not right now possible, which I can't do that now in React hooks testing library. So I'm just wondering, is there any other way to do that?
I may be misunderstanding you, but I'm pretty sure that what you're describing you can do. Let me see if I can phrase your question correctly. So you have two hooks that both consume the same context value. Is that right?
Yes, same context value.
And so you want to test them, but why can't you? I don't understand.
So can you wait? I will send a message in the Discord itself.
Yeah. If you can give like a little example of what you're talking about, because yeah, from what I hear, you absolutely can do what you're trying to do.
Okay.
Okay, cool. I'll share my screen again and go back to these Discord questions. Okay, Gobinath, sorry if I'm saying that wrong. Want to know how to swap user. So I have swap ID 2 in ID 4. They should interchange their ID and position, but otherwise should remain the same. How do I do this? Must have a drag and drop. This is a challenge. I have not done drag and drop in a long time. So I may not be the person to ask about drag and drop, but I know we have lots of really cool libraries. And I'll bet that folks even listening right now could reply and provide some ideas of libraries you can use for the drag and drop portion. So you got to turn sideways here. This UI, and you're trying to swap this card with one of these other cards. I'm not sure I totally follow what the UI is supposed to do, but I think that it's not so much about like the UI as it is about the data. And so like if you get a good solid drag and drop library, and then you know what that interaction is supposed to do to the data, then I think with those two combined, you should be able to get things working pretty well. I'm not sure what else to say about that. So good luck. Oh, and you just joined in. Hey there. You have anything to add to what you have here, Gomanath?
Hi, sir.
Hi.
I have a project in this. It's a basic, like a to-do app like structure, but here I like to implement the future in this ID, sir. But I cannot implement that. Why? How can I implement that feature, sir?
Yeah, so I think you may have been trying to join the Zoom call when I was answering your question. But I think all that you need is a good drag and drop library for React. There are at least two that I can think of, but I've never used any of these, so I'm not going to recommend a specific one. But there are probably people in the Discord who do and know of good ones. So this would be a great place to use the I need this channel to ask what are good React drag and drop libraries. And so if you have the library and then you know what data transformations are supposed to happen when the user drags and drops things in different places, then you should be able to implement this without too much trouble. This is definitely a solved problem. Drag and drop is a very common UI pattern. So
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
yeah, good luck.
Thank you, sir. Thanks.
All right, Yago, we've got a question here, or maybe just showing something, which is always fun. Playing around made the suspense hook. Do you know of any way to scope a prefetch to a component instance? Oh, okay. Yes, so let's take a look at what we've got. Is this, Yago, is this a reference to my prefetch thing for, oh no, it's probably not. Let me see.
I was just playing around.
Yeah, so where's the, oh, here's the prefetch. So this is module level thing, make suspender hook, use suspense, use suspender, whatever. Prefetch, okay. So this is where you create the hook. All right. Prefetch, and then here you create a suspender, which is a resource.
Yeah, if you want to prefetch, then you can pass in. You can do the make suspender hook that prefetch, and then you get a initial resource, and then you can pass in that into make suspender hook, and then I pass that into this initial state of use state.
Yeah, okay. And so you want to make it so that this initial to-do resource isn't a module level thing, but it's actually tied to an instance of a component, right?
Yeah, because if I have like multiple instances of to do, they won't share the same initial resource.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that well, so one thing to keep in mind first is that if you wait to actually create your prefetch thing to the when you render the to do, you're not actually prefetching. You're rendering as you let's see, your fetch on render is what's happening there. So probably want to avoid doing that because like otherwise there's no reason to prefetch. Like it's too late to do anything earlier. So that's going to be controlled probably by the parent. And yeah, and so you would put the this prefetch code call in whatever parent you're using, and that would end up going into state, and then pass. Yeah, and then you'd have your initial to-do resource. So here's the challenge here is that you are creating a dynamic hook with that make suspender hook. So I'm wondering if you need to pass that initial to do thing here. Let me just look at how this works. Yeah, okay, so you're starting with the initial resource, but that initial, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, you should be able to have this. What are these args that goes into the fetcher? Okay.
Yeah, it's whatever arguments that you need to pass into your the values you want to observe, like the ID, or if you have more stuff like the ID and page, those things go in there.
What's this use suspend effect? That's interesting.
I was just use update. You can see the use update effect. It just skips the first iteration of the use effect. So I won't prefetch and then fetch the ID1.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I'm thinking that, yeah, so like to frame the problem, you need to make sure that you call this inside of within the React call stack or within a React component. So it's not part of the module scope, right? So
Yeah.
if you're going to do that, and this would presumably be inside of the component that's rendering those things, or higher up, maybe put it in context or something, or just pass it as props. But ultimately, this needs to be inside of a component. And so that means that this also would need to be inside of a component. So if we keep things as you have it written now, that's what it would have to be. This would also have to be inside of a component. And to store that, you could put it in a ref or in state. But each instance of the component that you render will, each instance of the component that represents this suspending state will need to have one of these by itself in its own state. Maybe you have a use state array that renders all the to-do lists or something like that. And so each one would have this use to do suspender in state, which is unusual, but not like there's nothing stopping you from doing that. It probably wouldn't be the type of API that I would enjoy using personally, but yeah, totally possible. So given that, I think that maybe this is a little bit, I don't want to say it's early for an abstraction, but I think that the abstraction needs to be rethought. And so what I would suggest is try to get rid of the abstraction altogether and write out the use case that you have. Like, I want to render two of these things side by side, and they have like different parameters or whatever. And then slowly try to abstract it from that point forward, rather than building out the abstraction first. I think that there's a way to make this, to make an abstraction for this and make it work nicely. But I think that if you try to take what you have currently and rework it, that'd be more work than to just remove it and then try to abstract it from there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. The difference between like putting inside of the components that you're gonna not gonna be when you import the file, right? The prefetch. It's gonna be when you call the component, when it gets rendered. But it's not gonna be like after it renders to the screen. It's gonna be at the start of the render, right?
Yeah,
that makes sense.
That's a fair critic, or critique of the approach. So to take that a step further, there are a couple of things to keep in mind here. So in the bookshelf app, when I talk about render as you fetch, we have we can move loading the user into the module level, and we have just this endpoint that says bootstrap and just give me all of the data that a user needs when they load this. The only reason we have to do that is because we're client side. If it was server side, then things would be a little bit different. Like you would, before you actually render anything, you would make all of your calls to get data, and then you would go ahead and render. So you don't need to worry about like doing things at the same time. The only time where it's like on initial load is what I'm talking about. So the only time on initial load where it's important for you to start fetching inside of like the body of the module is if you're doing client side. So if we get outside of the idea that this is on the initial render, this is actually happening on a user interaction, then that actually is different. It ends up being the same whether you're doing client side or server side. It's no different, because you can't actually start fetching until the user does something, right? You don't know which contact they're going to select or whatever, and so or which to-do list they're going to select. And so it ends up working out that everything is inside of the context of a React component, because as soon as the user clicks the button or whatever, then you can say, oh, okay, so they clicked on this button, let's go prefetch. And I think the best example of that is in the React suspense module in our last exercise here, if we look at this. So what we have here is when, as soon as you select your Pokemon, oh yeah, here it is. So before you've selected your Pokemon, and just for the sake of people, I'm pretty sure you've seen this before, but I'll show it for everybody else. So when you select your Pokemon here, that's when we know what we can render. And we're loading all of these different things as soon as, like, these are all lazy loaded, all these different components. So we start out rendering just this stuff. It's pretty simple. And then once we select a Pokemon, so on submit here, we have this handle submit, and that's when we start the transition. We set the Pokemon resource and we fetch user. This actually, I need the extra credits. Huh, that's weird. There are totally extra credits on this one. Hold on a second. Let me find this. What? Was this not? Hold on a second. Maybe. Do we have this? Huh. That is very strange. I lost some code. I'll have to review this. But yeah, there are definitely extra credits from this one because it's what I was going to show you. Was I created, man, where did it go? That's so weird. I created my own version of React.lazy that added a prefetch function on it. And so as soon as you click this handle submit, then that's when we trigger the prefetch on all of those. So at the end of the day, and you probably already know all this, so this is a waste of time, but at the end of the day, when it's something that happens after initial render, then you can have everything within the context of a React component because you're not actually going to start the prefetch until a user actually does something. So that is going to happen after the initial render. That's all I was going to say.
Yeah. So then, like, I have the to do button. So I think the best approach would be to remove like the initial resource from the make select hook, like when I pass in, and then I can prefetch and then pass into the to do and just add it to the use to do suspenders. So I have like the initial, or like I'll hover, and then if it's prefetched, then I'll render it and put into the state, right? Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah,
I think playing around and ended up with this abstraction. I was like trying to see if there's a way to make it work, but there's probably, yeah, as I said, like if it's module level, there's probably no way to do this.
Yeah, I think that that could be very similar to what we do here, where the resource, so the resource is being managed at the app level, and then that resource is being passed to the Pokemon info. So like in yours, that's the to do. And so we actually do accept a resource object in here, and we interact with that resource object. Now, yours could be, could accept the initial resource, and then you also pass some additional information, I suppose. But by the, I don't know if there's any reason to accept yeah. So right here, you're saying use to do suspender and use pass the ID. I'm not sure what good the ID is going to be if you already have an initial to do resource. Like, in fact, you don't need the ID in this case because you already have specified what the ID is going to be right here. And so once you've created the resource already, all you need to do here is accept that resource, and then you move on from here. So it looks like what use to do suspender could do at that point is it accepts the resource and then it calls read for you, and then you just get the to do back. It would be a pretty small little abstraction there, but yeah.
But then if the ID changes, I'll need to like fetch the, like, if it changes, I'm saying like that there's different use case. Like if I have one instance of to do, or if I have multiple, like if I have one instance where the props change all the time, then you have to watch for the ID, right? So you have the initial one that's prefetched, and then you have the other one that's going to be fetched as you like search for more to dos. But yeah,
Right.
I get the point. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think if the resources are just managed at like the lowest component that knows everything it needs to start prefetching, that's all that's needed. And so with the app, all the resources would be managed in here, and then you'd iterate over those resources to render the to-dos and just pass the resource. And the to-do knows and cares nothing about what ID it is. They just get the resource.
Yeah, that makes sense. That helped a lot, Ken. Thank you.
Yeah. And I hope that ends up resulting in something that you can make a useful abstraction out of. But in the React Suspense module, I kind of took it as far as I could to make like a useful abstraction where we have this use Pokemon resource. And that's about as far as I thought I could usefully take it. So.
Yeah, I was just playing around to see where I could take it.
Yeah, totally. I think it's
Thank
awesome. And now I'm just gonna look really quick to see, because this one, yeah, it's not there at all. That is so weird. Maybe I did remove it at some point. I suppose I must have. That is so like, does anybody know what I'm talking about? Where I talk about my my own version of React.lazy?
I sent you a link to the GitHub commit where it still existed.
Okay.
I'm not sure what happened with it.
Well, the last thing I did was make a bunch of changes. Yeah, that's fixed thing. This should work. Update everything. Yeah, that's how I do this. That is so strange. I wonder why I removed that. I cannot. You know what it probably was is Suspense is just so experimental. Yeah, there it is. I removed it, and I didn't give myself a very useful comment or commit message to explain why. But yeah, here it is. Preloadable lazy. Where I take the dynamic import, I make my own function out of it, so that I don't call the dynamic import more than once. And then preload is just to call the dynamic import. And so then when they click on it, then I can say, okay, I know that you're going to re-render and everything. That may take some time, especially since the way the suspense list works is once you get one of these suspending, any of these, once any of these start suspending, then it stops and it won't continue to render anything else, which means that when you have a React.lazy, it will do exactly what we saw actually. This is what that's supposed to solve. Where is it? React suspense. So if we go to the final, so actually, no, you can compare it. So look at exercise 7. If we choose Pikachu, then it loads in and it kind of like bounces around. That's kind of what we're solving. But if you look at the final, it doesn't bounce around as much. It's like more specific. I can control which one loads in and when and whatever. Yeah, CSS was never my strong suit. But it takes longer to load those. And that's because it said, okay, let's load this one. Oh, that's suspended. Let's wait for it to be done. Okay, now we'll load this one. That's by design with suspense list, as they do that. And I didn't like that. And so that's why I added, where did it go? This. So I'd say, okay, go ahead and preload all of those. And then it went faster. And I guess I just decided I didn't want to include that for some reason. I think I mentioned this in a GitHub issue on the React repo, and I said, here's what I built, and I can't remember. It kind of, everything with suspense was kind of like, yeah, we don't know, we're not sure, like maybe we'll change things. So that may have been the reason, but now I can't remember. I should have written a better commit message, I guess. Anyway, so that's fun. At the end of the day, start loading stuff as soon as you possibly can, and things will load faster. Good luck with this, Yago. Thanks. I always appreciate your questions because they're always really insightful and kind of fun.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got some sweet, handy tips here. Okay, sweet. Let's figure out what this is all about. So we've got this render hook. Yeah, you got use custom hook. Oh, yeah, okay. So so you want to render both custom hook 1 and custom hook 2. You want them both, and they, by default, the way that render hook works is creates a test component, and it calls that and calls your custom hooks. So you want both hooks to be in different components, but both components to be inside that same wrapper. I'm not sure I understand the use case for that, but you, yeah. Yeah, I don't think you'd be able to do this with testing library React hooks. I think you're right. So the solution is actually like pretty straightforward. You'd use React testing library. Yeah, okay, we'll just do JS here. So you'd say render, and then let's just do a fragment. Custom hook test component 2 and 1, and then your wrapper be the wrapper component. And so then your custom hook test component 1 would just be a simple component. So yeah, it'd be probably something like, let's just go a little bit more full on this. So custom hook test comp 1 is just a thing that, well, I guess we're going to need to make that a multi-line function here. So then use custom hook 1. Yeah, this is where things get a little tricky. Actually, if you've done Epic React, I show you the process. And actually, you know what? There's another blog post that you'll find useful here. So custom hooks. Yeah. So I'll stick this in there too. That will definitely be helpful here. But here we'll say let val 1. Okay, and then return null. And then we'll do the same thing for 2. We'll have a val 2 here. And then you can insert on val 1 and val 2. And that would do it for you. But this is with React testing library. You wouldn't, as far as I know, I'm pretty positive that there's no way to do what you want to do with React hooks testing library. But I am unsure I understand the use case, like why those 2 components need to be, or why those 2 hooks need to be in different components.
But
yeah.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out how React query actually works. So I'm just creating a React query, sample React query like that, simplified React query. So in that has 2 custom hooks, which communicates to a server. So I want to be 2 different components.
I see. Okay, so this is like library level stuff. That makes a lot more sense. Yeah. So this would do it. Good luck. Okay, sweet. Good question. I don't really like suspense. Yago, you're gonna love Remix because it solves all of the problems that I wanted suspense for. It also solves pretty much all the problems that I wanted. Not all of them, but many of the problems that make me excited about React server components as well. Not all of them, but so React server components with Remix will be even better. But yeah, I'm totally on board with you, Yago. Once I started using Remix, I was like, oh, sweet. So I don't need suspense anymore. They eliminated the problem that suspense solves. They also eliminated the problem that GraphQL solves, at least for client-side GraphQL, so like Apollo and stuff in my mind. Yeah, I mean, I imagine some people may have some use cases, but like there's so fewer use cases. Remix just eliminates a lot of problems, which is awesome.
I'm gonna have to try it out because the more I use it, the more I play with suspense. I'm like, this is not good. It's all super clunky. Like, there's no way this is going to be the solution that we have.
Yeah, and there's a reason that the React team hasn't finished it and hasn't like released it officially, and there hasn't been any real movement on it either. and there's a reason why React server components became a thing. If suspense really solved all the problems, we wouldn't need server components. But it didn't. They realized, they're like, oh, this is not going to do it for us. And so that's where server components was motivated out of. And yeah, and they're cool. Server components are sweet, but yeah, Remix
what
solves
worries me is that they released Relay that uses suspense, but suspense is not ready. So I feel like a lot of people not knowing this, because there's a warning in the Relay docs. They're gonna start implementing, they're gonna feel the pains that I did when we started using Relay at work, and just it's just not a good experience.
Yeah, yep, I'm on board with you. And I just feel like GraphQL and Relay and Apollo, they solve problems, but so many people don't have the problems that these things solve, or they don't have the problem severely enough to warrant a costly solution like Apollo and Relay. I mean, some people may disagree with me, but I feel that way. Like, so the cool thing with Remix is that you can keep your GraphQL server. That's fine if you want to do that. But like all of your communication with APIs happens in loaders, which will happen on your own server. And so, yeah, if you're happy with GraphQL, that's sweet. But even if you don't have GraphQL, one of the big problems that GraphQL solves is caching, of course, and normalizing queries. So you make fewer requests, and also the amount of data that you send. You only need to send the data over the wire that you actually need. Well, with Remix, because you have your loader, if there's too much data that you get back from some API, then you can actually just whittle it down to the stuff that you need and then return that from your loader. And then your component only gets the stuff that it needs. So like, and you can use REST and you can use SOAP. You could use like anything, the file system, like it doesn't matter because that's all happening on the server anyway. And if the server to server communication is a problem and you're sending too much data, then yeah, sure, GraphQL between those two servers, sure, that's awesome, that's great. But you don't need a really complicated client side solution for this. So yes, and I agree with you, Yaga. The complexity growth is exponential with those solutions. It really is. It is definitely not worth the cost for most people. So yeah, Remix, it's the real deal. I'm not just saying it because my friends made it or whatever. Yeah, Remix is the bomb. It's going to make huge waves. And I don't care if you think that developers should not be paid for their work and you're mad that they're charging for it. Eventually it will be more accessible, especially I know that people in other countries have a lower purchasing power, and eventually they do plan on, or Ryan has told me that like they want to make it more accessible, and I'm not sure what they'll do for that, but he would love to see it open source one day, but they can't make it as awesome as it is as an open source thing. They need to feed their families. and so yeah, I'm super excited. And eventually, yeah, Yago, they may have a trial period or like a personal license. All of this, everything that I understand about their plans points to Remix becoming much more affordable or even free in the future. So yeah, but right now they can't do that. Otherwise they wouldn't be able to build anything. And honestly, I just love that becoming a user to Remix means that I'm giving Remix more resources to make it better. Whereas becoming a user to any other project means that I'm adding maintenance burden to that project, unless I am willing to put in a lot of effort to answer other people's questions and help and participate in the community. Which often I did, but not always can I do that. I've opened many issues on open source projects, and I don't feel any guilt at all telling Ryan and Michael that there's something wrong with Remix, because I gave them money, and so I'm paying for their time. And and I know that like my participation in their community will enable me to or will enable them to make it better, because I paid. And so I really like that, and I'm glad that they're making it paid. Anyway, any other questions before we wrap things up? Okay, sweet. Well, we finished on time today, and now I'm gonna go like lie down in bed or something, because I am starting to feel even more and more achy. Seriously, go get the vaccine. You notice that I am not feeling great. That's just the fact of life, but it is way better to get vaccinated. It's totally worth it. So do it. Go get yourself vaccinated. Yeah, that's all I have to say about that. Thanks everybody for hanging out. This was fun. We'll see you all probably next week. There actually may be something going on next week. Let me just double check. Yeah, it's possible that I won't be around next week, but maybe not. So like, yeah, just keep an eye on the channel here, and I'll mention whether I'll be able to make it next week or not. But yeah, it was fun. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all in the future. Goodbye.